The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 47 species gathered for what many believed would be humanity's final hearing. Honestly, most of us expected this to be a formality. The humans had been problematic. Their tendency to survive impossible situations, their stubborn refusal to follow established military doctrine, and their annoying habit of turning defeat into victory had become a source of considerable irritation among the more civilized races. I am Vorth-Ka of the Cytherian Collective, senior military advisor to the Council. My 4 eyes have witnessed the rise and fall of 18 different species. My crystalline exoskeleton bears the scars of 100 battles. And yet, sitting in that chamber that day, I felt something I had not experienced in over 3 centuries. Uncertainty. The humans have violated 17 separate articles of the Galactic Military Code, announced General Thex Prime, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically at the holographic displays. Their so-called improvised tactics have resulted in unnecessary casualties, resource waste, and complete disregard for established chain-of-command protocols. The human delegation sat in the defendants section, looking remarkably calm for a species about to be stripped of their military privileges. There were 5 of them, 3 officers in crisp blue uniforms, 1 grizzled veteran with more scars than skin, and a young female who seemed oddly out of place. This female human intrigued me. While her companions wore standard military attire with visible rank insignia, she wore a simple black uniform with no markings whatsoever. No ribbons, no bars, no indication of her role in their hierarchy. She sat quietly, hands folded, watching the proceedings with an expression that somehow managed to be both respectful and amused. The incident at Kepler 442b alone, continued General Thex Prime, his voice rising with indignation, demonstrates their complete inability to follow proper military procedure. When faced with a superior Korthak force, any civilized species would have executed a tactical withdrawal according to Regulation 7.4.2. Instead, these humans decided to charge directly into enemy fire while screaming something about their mothers. A ripple of scandalized clicks and whistles echoed through the chamber. The Korthak representative, a massive insectoid creature named Zix-881, nodded all 6 of his heads in agreement. Most irregular, Zix-881 buzzed. We had established perfect defensive positions. Our tactical computers calculated a 97.3% probability of human defeat. Victory was mathematically certain. One of the human officers, a middle-aged male with graying hair, leaned forward slightly. "General Marcus Webb, Terran Defense Force," he said calmly. "If I may address the Council?" "You may not," Thex Prime snapped. "Your species is here to receive judgment, not to offer excuses for your chaotic behavior." The painty, unnamed female human's lips twitched slightly. Was that amusement? How curious. I had studied human military records extensively. Their victories defied logical analysis. At Kepler 442b, they had indeed faced impossible odds against the Korthak. Standard tactical doctrine demanded retreat. Instead, they had somehow convinced the enemy that retreat was impossible by pretending to be far more numerous than they actually were. Conducted a frontal assault that no sane military commander would attempt, and emerged victorious through sheer audacity and what their reports labeled aggressive negotiations. The result? The Korthak surrendered an entire star system. "The humans cannot be trusted with military authority," declared Ambassador Yex Prime of the Zentorian Empire, her tentacles writhing with emphasis. "They treat warfare like some sort of game. Their casualty reports include categories we have never seen before. What, precisely, is death by excessive cleverness? General Webb cleared his throat. Well, ma'am, that particular category refers to enemy forces who overthought simple situations and essentially defeated themselves. We find it happens more often than you'd expect. The chamber erupted in confused chittering and mechanical whirring. Death by excessive cleverness? This was not a recognized military classification in any civilized taxonomy of combat casualties. Thex Prime's primary manipulator appendage slammed against his podium. This is exactly what we mean. Humans have no respect for proper military terminology. Your reports read like entertainment rather than official documentation. To be fair, said another human officer, a female with short red hair, our entertainment industry does draw heavily from our military experiences. Sometimes it's hard to tell which influenced which. This admission caused what I can only describe as collective galactic indigestion among the assembled delegates. The Rigelians began flashing colors I had never seen before. The Andromedans' translator units actually sparked and required emergency cooling. Through it all, the unmarked female human continued to sit quietly, her expression growing more amused by the minute. She had not spoken once during the proceedings, had not identified herself, and seemed completely unconcerned with the gravity of the situation her species faced. I found myself studying her more closely. Humans, despite their chaotic nature, were generally respectful of hierarchy and protocol when the situation demanded it. For her to remain silent while her species' military future hung in the balance suggested either extreme confidence or complete indifference. Neither possibility seemed particularly human-like. The final straw, Thex Prime continued, was the Battle of Proxima Station. When faced with a Valkorian siege fleet of 250 vessels, proper military doctrine called for immediate surrender negotiations. The station had defensive capabilities, equivalent to perhaps 30 ships at most. Any reasonable commander would have acknowledged the mathematical impossibility of victory. The assembled delegates murmured agreement. The Valkorians were renowned for their methodical, overwhelming approach to warfare. Their fleets were perfectly coordinated, their tactics flawlessly executed, their victory calculations always accurate to within 0.01% probability. Instead, Thex Prime's voice rose to what I assumed was intended as dramatic emphasis. The humans somehow convinced the Valkorians that the station was equipped with experimental weapons that could destroy entire fleets. They provided false technical specifications that were so convincing, so detailed, and so theoretically plausible that the Valkorian fleet withdrew. The silence in the chamber was profound. Even the typically chattering Betelgeusians had fallen quiet. There were no experimental weapons, Thex Prime added unnecessarily. The entire thing was an elaborate deception based on theoretical physics papers that turned out to be someone's university thesis project from 70 years ago. I could not help but notice that several delegates were now looking at the human delegation with what appeared to be reluctant admiration. The ability to convince a superior force to withdraw through pure intellectual intimidation was impressive, if highly irregular. The humans' success rate is undeniably high, admitted Counselor Kex, 7 of the Mechanoid Collective, his optical sensors whirring as they focused on the defendants. However, their methods remain fundamentally incompatible with established military doctrine. They appear to operate under the assumption that rules exist merely as suggestions. General Webb shrugged. Rules are important, he agreed, but they're tools, not masters. When following the rules means everyone dies, maybe it's time to get creative. Creative? Thex Prime repeated the word like it left a bad taste in his nutrient intake orifice. Military operations are not meant to be creative. They are meant to be precise, calculated, predictable. Predictable gets you killed, observed the scarred veteran, speaking for the first time. His voice carried the weight of experience. Enemy reads the same rule book you do. This simple statement caused another wave of uncomfortable shifting among the delegates. It was true, of course. Standard military doctrine was taught in academies across the galaxy. Every species learned the same fundamental principles of warfare, logistics, and command structure. The humans, it seemed, had taken these lessons as starting points rather than absolute truths. Colonel Sarah Chen, Terran Marine Corps, the red-haired officer introduced herself. The gentleman is correct. When everyone follows the same playbook, warfare becomes predictable, stagnant. We've studied galactic military history. Most conflicts follow identical patterns: force assessment, probability calculations, negotiated surrender based on mathematical certainty. Very tidy, very civilized, very boring. The Andromedan's translator units began smoking again. Warfare is not meant to be entertaining. Thex Prime's indignation reached new heights. It is a serious matter of resource allocation and territorial adjustment. Maybe that's the problem, Chen replied cheerfully. You've turned war into accounting. Where's the passion? The innovation? The sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat when someone with a calculator tells you the odds? I noticed that the unnamed female human's shoulders were now shaking slightly. She appeared to be suppressing laughter. How extraordinary! Her species faced potential military exile from galactic affairs, and she found the situation amusing. Passion, muttered Ambassador Yex Prime. Innovation. These are not military concepts. They are human concepts, Chen corrected. And they work. The debate continued for another hour, with delegate after delegate presenting evidence of human military irregularities. The humans had violated noise ordinances during battle by playing something called rock music at maximum volume. They had confused enemy forces by pretending to retreat while actually advancing in a different direction. They had won a siege by convincing the besieging force that the humans had developed a taste for their species' cuisine and were looking forward to the culinary opportunities that prolonged conflict would provide. Through it all, the mysterious female remained silent. Finally, Thex Prime called for the formal vote. All those in favor of revoking humanity's military privileges and removing them from active galactic defense duties? 43 manipulator appendages, tentacles, claws, and mechanical arms rose into the air. Those opposed? 4 appendages rose. The humans had some friends, it seemed, though not many. The motion carries, Thex Prime announced with satisfaction. Humanity is hereby stripped of military authority and will be relegated to support roles only. No human shall hold command rank above level 3 in any joint operation. No human tactical doctrine shall be implemented without prior approval from a galactic military review board. And absolutely no human shall be permitted to lead any operation involving more than 50 personnel from any species. The human delegation exchanged glances. General Webb's expression was carefully neutral. Chen looked disappointed but not surprised. The scarred veteran just shrugged. And the unnamed female? She was smiling. Not the polite diplomatic smile one might expect in such circumstances. This was something altogether different. This was the smile of someone who knew something the rest of us did not. She stood up. The entire chamber fell silent. Even the mechanical humming of the mechanoid delegates seemed to quiet. There was something about her movement, her posture, that commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with rank or protocol. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Thex Prime's 4 eyes focused on her with visible irritation. "The human delegation was not given permission to speak. This hearing is concluded." She smiled wider. "Oh, I'm not speaking as part of the delegation." The chamber's attention focused on her with laser-like intensity. Who was this unmarked female? What authority did she claim? She turned to face General Webb, her expression shifting to something that looked almost formal. "General? Permission to speak freely?" Webb's face went very still. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Permission granted, ma'am." "Ma'am?" Why was a general addressing an apparently junior officer as ma'am? She turned back to face the assembled delegates, and something fundamental changed in her bearing. The quiet observer was gone, replaced by someone who radiated authority, like a small star radiates heat. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings," she began, her tone conversational but carrying an undertone that made my exoskeleton tingle with unidentified energy. "I am Fleet Admiral Elena Martinez, Supreme Commander of Human Space Forces." The silence that followed could have been measured in geological ages. Fleet Admiral? Supreme Commander? These were ranks that simply did not exist in human military structure, according to our intelligence reports. The highest confirmed human military rank was General, equivalent to our Level 8 classification. "That is impossible," Thex Prime stammered. "Our intelligence reports clearly indicate that humans have no military ranks above General." Martinez's smile took on a distinctly predatory quality. "Your intelligence reports are based on our public military structure," she said pleasantly. "You know, the part we let everyone see. Did you really think a species as paranoid and devious as humans would show you all our cards?" I felt my secondary hearts beginning to race. The implications of her statement were staggering. How much of humanity's military capability had been hidden? How many layers of deception were we only now beginning to glimpse? "This is preposterous." Yex Prime's tentacles writhed in agitation. "You cannot simply invent new ranks to avoid the consequences of this hearing." "I'm not inventing anything," Martinez replied calmly. "I'm simply revealing what was always there. You see, the officers sitting over there?" She gestured toward her companions. "They represent our regular forces, our visible military, the part of our capabilities we're comfortable with you knowing about." She paused, letting that sink in. "I represent everything else." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. I found myself reassessing every assumption I had made about human military capabilities. If Martinez was telling the truth, if there truly was an entire hidden layer to human military organization. "Prove it," Thex Prime demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Martinez reached into her uniform and withdrew a small device. She placed it on the table in front of her and activated it with a simple touch. The holographic display that materialized above the device was like nothing I had ever seen. Star charts showed human military installations in sectors we had believed empty. Fleet compositions revealed ship classes that did not appear in any intelligence report. Personnel numbers that suggested human military forces were approximately 10 times larger than we had estimated. But it was the final display that caused what I can only describe as collective cardiac distress among the assembled delegates. Current deployment locations for something called intervention fleets showed human vessels positioned throughout the galaxy in a pattern that suggested. "You're everywhere," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. Martinez nodded. "We're everywhere," she confirmed. "We have been for quite some time." You see, while you were busy debating whether humans could be trusted with military authority, we were quietly positioning ourselves to protect galactic civilization, whether you wanted us to or not. She gestured to the holographic display. Fleet 7 is currently preventing a Sicarian invasion of the Altair system. The Sicarians don't know they're there. Neither did you, apparently. Fleet 12 has been tracking a Void Hunter incursion in the Outer Rim for 6 months, keeping them away from populated systems, again, without any of you noticing. The implications were overwhelming. While the Council had been treating humans as junior partners in galactic defense, they had been operating as the galaxy's invisible guardians. This is why, Martinez continued, her tone becoming more serious, your vote today is not just misguided. It's dangerous. You're not just removing a chaotic element from your tidy military structure. You're crippling the only force that's been keeping most of you alive. Thex Prime's manipulator appendages were trembling with either rage or fear. Possibly both. Even if what you claim is true, it only proves that humans cannot be trusted. You've been operating in secret, conducting military operations without Council approval. Because Council approval takes 6 months and requires forms filed in triplicate, Martinez shot back, her diplomatic facade finally cracking to reveal something harder underneath. By the time you finish debating whether a threat is worth responding to, entire systems could be dead. She stood up straighter, and I realized that everyone in the chamber, regardless of species, was now looking up at her, not because of her height, but because of something indefinable about her presence. "General Webb," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber with crystal clarity, "you and your people have done exemplary work representing our public face to the galactic community. Your patience with this process has been admirable." Webb nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am." "Orders?" Martinez looked around the chamber one more time, her gaze settling briefly on each delegate. When those eyes met mine, I felt as though she was looking directly through my exoskeleton and into whatever passed for my soul. "Stand down from Council operations," she said quietly, "effective immediately." The chamber erupted in chaos. The chaos that followed Martinez's order was unlike anything I had witnessed in 3 centuries of Council proceedings. Delegates were shouting in 47 different languages, translator units were overheating, and Ambassador Yex Prime's tentacles had turned a shade of purple that I was fairly certain indicated imminent cardiovascular failure. "You cannot simply withdraw from galactic defense," Thex Prime roared, his 6 arms flailing wildly. "The treaties!" "The agreements, the carefully balanced defense matrices." Martinez raised one eyebrow. Just one. Somehow, that single gesture commanded more attention than all of Thex Prime's theatrical arm-waving. "Treaties?" she said, her voice cutting through the din like a plasma cutter through butter. "You mean the treaties that just stripped my species of military authority?" "Those treaties?" The shouting died down to nervous muttering. Even the Betelgeusians had stopped their incessant chittering. General Webb and his officers were already standing, gathering their materials with practiced efficiency. Colonel Chen caught my attention as she packed her datapad. She was grinning like a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. "This is madness!" squeaked Counselor Kex 7, his optical sensors spinning frantically. "Without human support, our defense calculations show vulnerability increases by 300%. "Your defense calculations," Martinez replied pleasantly, "didn't even know we existed 20 minutes ago. I'm not entirely confident in their accuracy." She had a point, a terrifying, galaxy-shaking point. "Wait," I found myself saying, my voice carrying across the chamber before I realized I was speaking. Fleet Admiral Martinez, if I may ask, what exactly happens now? Those predatory eyes focused on me, and I felt like a small prey animal caught in the open. Now? Now you get to find out how much you really needed us. The scarred veteran, who had remained silent throughout the chaos, finally spoke up. Respectfully, Admiral, some of these folks are going to die without backup. Martinez's expression softened slightly. I know, Sergeant. Which is why this isn't permanent. Consider it an educational experience. Educational experience. The casual way she said it made my exoskeleton crawl. How long? Asked Ambassador Kex 9 of the Centauri Federation, her mechanical voice unusually subdued. Until you ask nicely, Martinez replied. Until you acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the chaotic humans know something about warfare that your textbooks don't cover. Until you realize that sometimes the best defense against an unpredictable universe is equally unpredictable defenders. Thex Prime had recovered enough to attempt regaining control of the situation. This is blackmail. No, Martinez corrected him. Blackmail would be if we threatened to do something harmful unless you paid us. This is simply us stepping aside and letting you handle things yourselves. You voted. You decided you didn't need human military involvement. Congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for. The logic was impeccable, also absolutely terrifying. But the Void Hunters, whispered Ambassador Yex Prime, her tentacles now a sickly green color. The Sicarian expansion. The Dark Nebula incidents. Will be handled according to proper galactic military protocol, Martinez said cheerfully. Form committees. Run probability analyses. File reports in triplicate. Take votes. I'm sure everything will work out fine. The chamber fell into a silence so profound that I could hear my own respiratory systems cycling. Everyone present understood the implications. Without human intervention, response times to galactic threats would increase from hours to months. Military operations would return to the predictable, methodical approach that had characterized pre-human galactic defense. The approach that had been failing spectacularly before humans arrived. There has to be a compromise, I said, surprising myself again by speaking. Some middle ground. Martinez turned that terrifying attention back to me. Middle ground? You mean like the middle ground where humans continued risking their lives to protect galactic civilization while being treated like unruly children? That middle ground? I felt heat building in my carapace. Embarrassment, I realized. She was absolutely right. Admiral, General Webb said quietly, incoming priority transmission. Martinez touched her ear, listening to something only she could hear. Her expression grew serious. Understood. Deploy Fleet 15. Rules of engagement, Tango 7. Authorization, Martinez Alpha 9. She looked up at the assembled delegates. Ladies, gentlemen, and various sentient beings, you're about to get your first lesson in galactic defense without human assistance. A new holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed the Kepler sector, where a massive Void Hunter fleet had just emerged from dark space. 47 ships, each the size of a small moon, moving toward inhabited systems with obvious hostile intent. Void Hunters, breathed Counselor Kex 7. Class 7 incursion. Estimated population at risk. 4 billion souls across 12 systems. The chamber erupted again, but this time it was panic rather than outrage. Response time using standard galactic protocols? Martinez asked conversationally. Kex 7's sensors whirred as he calculated. Committee formation, 6 hours. Threat assessment, 12 hours. Resource allocation debate, 18 hours. Fleet deployment authorization, 24 hours. Minimum response time, 48 hours. Population survival probability after 48 hours of Void Hunter presence. The silence stretched like a held breath. 0, Keck 7 admitted. Martinez nodded. Now watch how we used to handle things. The display shifted, showing human fleet movements. Ships appeared from nowhere, materializing out of what seemed like empty space around the Void Hunter formation. They moved in patterns that defied conventional tactical doctrine. Chaotic, unpredictable, but somehow coordinated. Fleet 15, commanded by Admiral Lisa Park, Martinez narrated, 32 ships, mostly destroyers and cruisers, outnumbered, outgunned, operating without council authorization or support. The battle that unfolded was unlike anything in recorded galactic military history. The human ships didn't engage in traditional formation fighting. Instead, they swarmed like angry insects, striking from impossible angles, disappearing and reappearing without warning. They're using the Void Hunter's own mass against them, I realized, watching the tactical display. Creating gravitational eddies to slingshot around the larger ships. Improvised tactics, Colonel Chen said proudly. Admiral Park developed that maneuver during a training exercise 3 years ago. Command deemed it unnecessarily risky and impossible to standardize. On the display, human ships were dancing between Void Hunter vessels, using their size advantage against them. It was insane. It was impossible. It was working. Current Void Hunter casualties? Martinez asked. 17 ships destroyed, 12 disabled, reported Keck 7, his voice filled with something approaching awe. Human casualties? 2 ships damaged, 0 destroyed. Estimated crew losses. Keck 7 paused, recalculating. None. 32 human ships had engaged 47 Void Hunter vessels and suffered 0 fatalities while achieving overwhelming tactical success. The entire battle lasted 14 minutes. That, Martinez said as the display faded, is what you just voted to give up. The silence that followed wasn't just profound. It was ashamed. Ambassador Yex Prime's tentacles had returned to their normal color, but she looked deflated. We made an error. You made several errors, Martinez corrected. You assumed chaos meant incompetence. You confused unpredictability with unreliability. Most importantly, you forgot that sometimes the best way to protect civilization is to be more dangerous than anything threatening it. Vex Prime's manipulator appendages had stopped waving. He looked older somehow, diminished. What do you want from us? Respect, Martinez said simply. Recognition that maybe, just maybe, the species that survived by being too stubborn to die when the universe said they should might know something about protecting others from the same fate. She gestured toward her companions. These officers represent some of the finest military minds in human space. General Webb has successfully commanded joint operations involving 17 different species. Colonel Chen has developed tactical innovations that have saved millions of lives. Sergeant Jackson has personally participated in 47 combat operations without losing a single soldier under his command. The chamber was listening now, really listening. But more than that, Martinez continued, you need to understand that we're not asking to be in charge. We're asking to be partners, real partners, not junior associates who get consulted after all the important decisions have been made. The irregular tactics, Vex Prime began weakly. Work, Martinez interrupted. They work because the universe is irregular. Chaos isn't the enemy of order. It's evolution. It's adaptation. It's survival when everything logical says you should be dead. I found myself standing. Fleet Admiral Martinez, speaking as senior military advisor to this council. What would partnership look like? She smiled, and for the first time since she'd revealed herself, it was a warm expression rather than a predatory one. Joint command structures where human tactical flexibility combines with galactic strategic planning. Shared intelligence that doesn't involve hiding half our capabilities from each other. Training programs where your species learn from our improvisation while we learn from your discipline. She paused. And maybe, just maybe, a little trust that when humans do something that looks insane, there might be a method to our madness. The vote, stammered Counselor Kex 7. We would need to reverse the vote. Actually, Martinez said, you don't. Every optical sensor, compound eye, and organic visual apparatus in the chamber focused on her. The vote removed humans from official galactic military authority. It said nothing about consulting agreements, independent contractor relationships, mutual defense pacts between sovereign species. The brilliant, devious implications of her statement hit the chamber like a plasma wave. You're suggesting we hire you, I said, unable to keep the admiration out of my voice. I'm suggesting you acknowledge what you actually need, Martinez replied. You need human military capabilities. We need recognition that we're not just useful idiots who occasionally stumble into victory. Seems like a reasonable basis for negotiation. Over the next hour, the greatest diplomatic reversal in galactic history took place. The same delegates who had voted to strip humans of military authority began frantically proposing bilateral defense agreements, joint training initiatives, and special consulting arrangements. It was, I realized, exactly what Martinez had planned from the beginning. One question, I said, as the formal negotiations began. Why reveal yourself? Now? Why not earlier? Martinez considered the question seriously. Because you needed to understand the stakes. You needed to realize that the chaotic, unpredictable humans you were dismissing were the only thing standing between civilization and a very dark universe. Sometimes the best way to teach someone the value of something is to take it away. Educational experience, I said, remembering her earlier words. Exactly. Her smile turned sharp again. Consider your education complete. As the Council began drafting new frameworks for human galactic military cooperation, I watched Martinez and her team prepare to leave. They moved with the easy confidence of people who had known exactly how this would end before it began. Fleet Admiral, I called out as she reached the chamber doors. She turned back. Yes, Advisor Vorth-Ka? The other fleets, the hidden installations, the capabilities we still don't know about. What about them? I gestured at the chaos of negotiation filling the chamber. How much of human military strength are we still not seeing? Martinez paused in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Advisor Vorth-Ka, she said finally, today you learned that everything you thought you knew about human capabilities was wrong. You discovered that we've been protecting the galaxy while you debated whether we were qualified to do so. You realize that chaos and competence aren't mutually exclusive. She stepped through the doorway, then looked back one final time. What makes you think today's revelations were complete? The door closed behind her, leaving me staring at empty air and contemplating the terrifying, thrilling possibility that humanity's greatest secrets were still waiting to be discovered. 3 months later, when the Joint Human Galactic Task Force successfully repelled the largest Void Hunter incursion in recorded history using tactics that would have been impossible under traditional command structures, I realized something important. The question was never whether humans could be trusted with military authority. The question was whether the rest of us were worthy of their protection. I suspect we're still working on that answer, but at least now we're asking the right question. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, Fleet Admiral Elena Martinez and her invisible armadas continue their watch, keeping civilization safe from threats we're still too civilized to imagine. The universe remains chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerous. Fortunately, so do we. Or rather, so do they. The humans, our guardians in the dark, whether we deserve them or not.